Sup everybody, this is Carrick with ACG, and it's my continuing mission to bring you reviews that aren't 2 minutes long or filled with sponsored bullcrap. Today I'm taking a look at the Outbreak Simulator, known as Quarantine on the PC. What happens when the world comes down with a case of creeping crack? That's right, you send in the Quarantine team to fix that up right quick. This is a turn-based game from developer Sproing and published by 505 Games, and it's on Steam now for $13.49. And remember, this is an early access game, but it asks for cash, so we always have to look at what it offers versus what it asks for. Let's see if ruminating the ramifications of a bunch of rednecks telling the world to rub friggin' rocks on their faces to stop a disease I lovingly referred to as Ass Krakatoa is actually any fun. As always, if you like the video, maybe subscribe. So here's my review for Quarantine. Government workers killed by paperwork, mad cow disease, and realizing the only way to save folks is to, well, there's really no saving folks. Graphics are up first. It's always good to remember that like many management type games, and certainly the titles and the board game this is trying to replicate and build from, they aren't known for flashy, well, anything. So you're going to find yourself staring at the main map screen and a couple side screens throughout the entire course of the game. First, let's look at the interface. Now, while it's pretty clean, apparently it took a let's launch and nuke it from orbit to be sure sensibility, meaning only the tech section and the agent section really have informational pop-ups to give you info, meaning if you want to see something else, it can get pretty clicky pretty fast. For example, indicating how many folks are waiting to be hired would have been welcomed on the main screen, especially since you only have a few slots for a few agents and they cost a lot of money. Now, this is all stuff that works wonders to really offer something that feels a bit more complex and informational than it may be. Instead, in many ways, Quarantine looks a bit more like a handheld device title without the bullshit microtransactions for energy we're all used to. That being said, though I didn't love its cumbersomeness from time to time, it's a fairly clean overall interface with a technical slant. While you don't see planes or cars or anything like that showing an active spread of the virus, though you do see lines from city to city, you do have an animated, well, ocean, just in case that one bastard lobster tries to swim past your quarantine to escape to New Mexico. Now, one nice thing we see in some games, but needs to continue, is that when you click on something here, there's usually a comic-like little animated title that shows, and it maybe shows people shaking hands or researching viruses, depending on what you're deciding to do, and that adds a little bit of movement to the screens. If there's one section that actually impressed me here, it's when you jump into the graphics options, there's a boatload of changes you can make. Hell, some AAA games don't even have that, and it was certainly appreciated. Even with that though, the game just really is graphically pretty weak and somehow doesn't impart the same lethality that say Plague Inc. does or look as sleek. Even for a game of this type, I would say overall it's a little too clinical and a little too blah. Sound, music, and voice.
No problem. No problem.
We're done here.
And of course, sound is up first in this trilogy of audio, and there is very little, just the beeps and boops when choosing things and actions and operations. I really wish they had more effects. When you quarantine a city or heal people, even a little cheering could remind you that you're not saving numbers, but people. In many ways, a game like this could do wonders with a little bit of human feeling within it. Like the graphics, just a little bit bland. Music. Okay, so this appears to be one track playing consistently, and while a longer track and a larger one, it's just one track. And to be honest, it's actually pretty good with an excellent hook and synths throughout that give you a very tech-forward impression, and even has a couple excellent moments where it fades out to just percussion and then the synth starts back up, and over the minutes it sort of gets back into repeating. To me, even a game at this cost, it really should have more than that one track, especially in a game where they may want you to play it for many hours on end. Because in the end, you really can't have one without somewhat offering the other. Voice. So this was actually surprising. Everything you take action on, your agents give you various bits of encouragement like that was close or almost didn't make it or what happened as they die. It's lean but absolutely appreciated with everyone speaking when assigned, and the voice samples are actually nice and clean. Now that's something that absolutely cannot be said for other titles in this price range and a little bit above. Gameplay. Now this is a little bit Pandemic the board game, then infect it with some Plague Inc. from PC and handheld devices, and you pretty much have this title, which is basically a game about saving the world from itself, turn by wretched turn. Because if there's ever a title that shows just how little humanity wants to save itself, this, my friends, is the one. First, let's revel at the massive budget these folks get to fight off a sweeping contagion that's turning the insides of its victims into human lava lamps. 10,000 a day. That's it. for an organization. 10,000. Random business CEOs get more than that. Hell, Carrot Top probably gets more than that. Here in quarantine, you're also fighting off a world that revolts when you try to stop people from leaving town and basically fucking themselves to death while spreading the disease. Or the gate-mouth folks who decide that vaccinations are bad and can't figure out why their kids are dropping like a game of Ring Around the Rosie. So you basically start out with a small amount of cash and a single agent that you can choose. They can be a medic, scientist, diplomat, or security, able to heal more people, research more about the virus, build more locations to get more money, or just straight up not die as fast as everyone else, and they're in that order. And then boom, you're done. You're plopped into the worst future from the movie Outbreak you could possibly imagine. Since this is a turn-based game, you take actions, then when money or manpower is exhausted, you watch your work unfold when you hit that end turn button. Now in the game proper, you have 4 major sections of it. The main map for choosing cities and taking actions, the lab where you poke and prod the disease into giving up its secrets, thus harming its potential to, well, do harm. And the tech section, which is split up into its own 4 sections that mimic the character classes, with upgrades like information to slow the spread of the disease, better training of agents, or clearing the infection, which basically just drops a shit ton of Purell all over the city after it's been cleaned of an infection so its slippity-slappity inhabitants can't come down with Thunder Rump ever again. And the last section is team. This is where you hire and fire people if you want. Now, most of the game happens in the main map with each city connected, usually with reflective thoroughfares to the cities near them, and they indicate their level of infection via graphical displays, and you can see it climbing turn by turn. Now, on a city, if you click on it, it allows for actions like building offices next to infected city, which basically fills it with more folks to help and get you more money, treatment operations, which basically lowers the infection rate, heal operative, which heals up the damage that happens to them signing papers and shit, I don't know. Quarantine city, now this one locks down the city, no infection in or out, but has a particular strength that can slowly be eroded. Then there's the sampling operation, and it gives you samples from the virus so you can work on a cure and advanced treatment, which bombards a local area with handy wipes and bleach and eradicates most of the virus. Now, everything has its strengths and weaknesses here, as well as damage from each operation you can do that accrue on your agent, which is listed in the operation costs, and each agent has a life bar. And sometimes those operations cost money and, of course, only work for a certain amount of time, so there's a lot of strengths and weaknesses going on here. Now, depending on what evil you're up against, whether it's bacteria, virus, or prion, each work in different ways. A bacteria might spread slowly inside cities, but spread very easily from city to city, and that's a distinction you want to understand in a hurry, especially if you decided to go up against prions, which don't spread city to city fast, but absolutely devastate the cities they're in with speed. And when you look at virus, it's sort of a middle ground. Now, you can see infection vectors from city to city easily, and depending on the amount of virus, a lot of little graphical representations of how bad it is appears. At some point, you're going to think, man, I need to actually cure this thing so I can win. That's where people collecting samples and your lab tab come into play. Collecting samples allows you to work on various parts of each disease, and once you decide what part to fight, you then set researchers to the task for a specific amount of days. Now, if you're somewhat flush with cash, you can also speed up that by hiring temps, because obviously, when you're working on a disease known as Soul Clumper, you always want a fucking temp working on it. Now, each time you successfully research a section of the infected material, it gives you additional actions you can perform during some of the special events that crop up. Now, if you wanted to jump into the tech section, there's various ways to fight off the infection in here, slowing down the infection rate, making your agents impervious to damage in some situations, or even helping out the lab's research. And you have a number of ways to inhibit the virus and strengthen your locations as well. You can also hire somebody here to speed up whatever work. But this is also all based off Pandemic, which means it's not that easy to win once you jump into the game proper, especially on the medium and hard difficulties. Agents can take massive damage depending on the situation that they perform, but you send them in anyway, and boom, they're dead. Now, this may happen when you have no money to hire someone else, so that means it's time to just sit back as you watch SARS 2.0 kill millions of toddlers and cities go into revolt. That's the thing. What appears easy is a game of balancing many different aspects, and while this is a fairly basic title, the randomness of the diseases coupled with the lack of resources makes it no real pushover. Additionally, since each type changes the overall tactics, if you aren't quick on your feet and more than a little lucky, you will watch that infection meter on the top left corner rise into the zone that indicates Earth itself probably needs to be quarantined. Sadly, not all is right here in the rosy red rash land. I just wish more would happen. The special events are cool and have specific requirements to deal with, and that doesn't even guarantee things will work out, and I love that. What happens when some dumbass celebrity with a head full of what the fuck decides to tell everyone to heal themselves with crystals? Well, you can denounce them or investigate the situation, finding some political issues underneath. Also, there's no multiplayer option, which I can't stress enough the game needs. It takes that which is the strength of Pandemic and neuters its chance of infecting others with its awesomeness. Instead, that push-pull of decisions and arguments among other players is all meted out on you, and it just doesn't really feel the same. And of course, that brings us to fun factor. It was actually pretty fun for a while. It's noticeably bare though, even when you understand the price of this game and basically its casual focus. Both in offerings for infections as well as personality, it just doesn't hit. Somehow, they healed that too, and too much, leaving something that's almost clinical in its presentation, and that really hurts it in the personality department. It's hard to care if Cape Down comes down with crotch rot if the multiplayer human factor is removed, and the rest is just so antiseptic, nothing holds it back up. So as you guys know, I rate games on a buy, wait for a sale, rent, or never touch it again rating scale, with rent being a deep sale for PC titles. And because this is a cheap game, and certainly not a bad one, this is a wait for a sale. It's very cheap, which absolutely helps this rating. But I just don't see anybody spending full price and feeling like they got paid for what they actually did, time versus investment. Now, it's not bad enough to get a wait for a deep sale. It's just one of those situations where you could spend many hours sitting back and playing against the 3 infections that they have, but it might be boring after the 3rd. So that's it for me. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. If you dislike the video, give it a thumbs down. Maybe check out Twitter, Patreon, or our Reddit. As always, peace out and enjoy the rest of your week.